All right, I think we're going to get started here. Welcome to everybody for coming, and thank you for your patience in waiting another couple of weeks from our originally scheduled date for this book club on white fragility. I'm Karen Abrams, and if my mic goes out, you'll have to excuse me. I'm Karen Abrams. I'm the Executive Director of Policy, Research, and Innovation. We're an Omaha-based nonprofit that... I think I'm just going to talk because that's the microphone. I tend to project, so I don't think anybody's going to have trouble hearing me. Is there anybody who cannot hear me?
There are some of us who are hearing deficient. I mean with deaf.
But you did just hear me, right?
But
So
what?
you can sit.
No, seriously. Seriously,
Really asking
the amplification
Okay.
is very helpful for the hearing impaired, particularly when there's noise happening next door to where they're sitting.
I completely understand. We're just having microphone problems. Okay, maybe this one will work. So, Policy, Research, and Innovation, otherwise known as PRI, is an Omaha-based nonprofit that is a catalyst for change. We use a race equity lens to analyze everything that we do in order to try to advance the policies that are going to create the kinds of places that we all want to live in. And for the last, I don't know, maybe 8 months, we have been having a wonderful partnership with Reverend Cynthia Lindenmeyer, raise your hand, who has been offering us her space here and her collaboration to create a wonderful series of community conversations on a bunch of different issues, all with the issue of race at their center. So we looked at gentrification from a racial standpoint, and police community relations from a racial standpoint, and several other topics. And now we decided that we wanted to take a deep dive into this book by Robin DiAngelo, called White Fragility. I don't know if everybody here has actually read the book, but it is definitely worth investing in. I highly recommend this book, and I have dog-eared pretty much every single page in it, so it's very important to me. And I just want to, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I do want to make a couple of introductory comments, because one of the things that I found most powerful to me in reading this book was thinking about white identity and my own white identity, which is a topic I came to fairly late in life, in my 50s, in fact. Because growing up, becoming an adult, I thought of myself as having many different identities. I'm a woman, I'm Jewish, I'm a liberal, I'm Midwestern, or since I was born in New York, sometimes I'm a New Yorker, depending on where I am. But never did I think of myself as white. And sure, I checked the little box next to what race you are, Caucasian, but I never thought through the majority of my life about being a white person as part of my identity. And it wasn't until I adopted my daughter almost 13 years ago. She'll be 13 in May. And my daughter's black. And when my husband and I adopted her, I came face to face with the reality that my lived experience was going to be different from hers because of the color of her skin. And I had to, as Ajmal Binden, who's sitting over here, who's the board chair of PRI, by the way, and is one of our co-organizers of these conversations, as we began to do a series of workshops around race, I really had to come face to face with the fact that I am a white person within a white supremacist world here in the United States, and to think about what did that mean. And it was, that was my sort of aha moment about my own race and what it means to be a white person within a white supremacist system. And so I wanted to ask some of you, other white people in the room, and people of color as well, can you describe an aha moment for yourself on race? Yes.
I'm very grateful for this. It happened when I was very young, and I learned a lot more as I went. But to this day, I've traveled around the sun 62 times, and to this day, I remember probably about 8 years old, and we had African-American garbage collectors in my neighborhood, which was predominantly white. And I just remember comments. My folks, I guess they were closet racists. I mean, they weren't the kind of people who would holler at people or make jokes, but I could tell just by that. And they made a comment one time about they had forgotten one of our trash cans or something. It was just really a benign, silly thing. And they said something, and it just something clicked. I don't know. I was probably about 10. And, like the Kel Giron, I learned silence from the talkative. I learned kindness from the unkind. That was a lesson. I didn't even really know I learned until a little bit later. But I was always really grateful for that. So that counts as an aha. It does for me.
Thank you. Yes, over here.
I think it was when I began teaching with the Omaha Public Schools that I was assigned to Lake School at 19th and Lake. And then maybe some of you don't even know there was such a school there. But anyway, that was before integration of schools. And as I stood there in front of the children, I suddenly became aware of the fact that I had no knowledge of their culture and history. That there was a big difference. And I had to go take some courses at Creighton University on Black history and Black culture and so on. That was probably when I first became aware of just how much I did not know. But I don't know if I don't think at the time, I do not think that I had any appreciation of what my being a member of the white supremacist society meant. I don't think I did.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was a adjunct professor at College St. Mary. This would have been something during the 2016 campaign election for Bernie Sanders running. I remember this. I had a black student who taught me a lot, but she came to practice. I was a speech coach. It was practice one night, and she came to practice, and she was telling me how she had gone to Walmart and how every time she goes to Walmart, she's followed around. And what really struck me was not that she was telling me this, but how commonplace she told this story. She was like, yeah, every time we go, I'm always followed around, and I'm used to it. And one, I've never been followed around in Walmart, ever. And two, she's like a petite 22-year-old. She's not how we often see black people in the media. And I was so shocked at if you are just, to me, there's nothing about her to be afraid of, right? If she's being followed around, no wonder somebody of a bigger stature, I just was so taken aback by that personal story. And then, more recently, there's a Facebook group, there's an Omaha Millennials Facebook group. I don't know how many millennials are here tonight. Another African-American friend of mine who's also millennial, she commented on a post that her question was, how do we dismantle whiteness? And I had a very mixed reaction to that. Part of me was very defensive. I took it kind of personally. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I want to unpack that. I want to understand the reaction I had to her posing my question.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else want to share? Yeah?
I think it was more of a slow dawn for me and started maybe when I got out about redlining and just how systemic lending, and just today there was another story on the radio about how during hurricane recovery the people with resources, the white people with resources, are getting more federal help than the people who are renters and need it more. So even there, there's a systemic.
So learning about systemic inequity along racial lines sort of spurred that. And any other people who want to share? I don't think that this is uncommon at all. This is what it means to have white privilege. It means that we don't have to be in touch with our racial identity. People of color every single day have to be aware of their racial identity because it's they're always in comparison to the majority. So that is a really good example for me of something major that I took away from this book. Another sort of smaller issue, but one that resonated deeply for me, was this idea that Robin DiAngelo talks about of white solidarity. I would never think of myself as somebody, I'm an anti-racist. I would never think of myself as, engaging in white solidarity. But I had to admit, this was just about a year and a half ago. I had written a series of emails to advertise a race workshop that Ajmal and I were doing. And since we were doing it, it'll go away. Ajmal and I were doing a series at Metropolitan Community College. And so I thought, oh, great. I will just send all the faculty at Metro information about these upcoming workshops. And so I went to the website and called a whole bunch of email addresses and sent out the information about the training we were doing on wading into whiteness. And I got one very heated email back. I got several emails like thank you, and a lot of just nobody paying attention. But this one woman wrote back, a faculty member in the communications department at Metro, and said, how did you get my email address? I am totally against this. I disagree with everything you're doing. Take me off your list. And I wrote her back and I said, I got your email off of the public website, and I will definitely take you off of our list, but I just want you to know you're exactly the kind of person that we're trying to reach. And I was pretty proud of myself for that, right? I took this information to the PRI board of directors, and 3 of the women on the board, who are all women of color, turned to me and said, you've got to go and you've got to tell her supervisor. And my heart sank. I don't want to tell her supervisor. So I put it off. 2 months went by, 2.5 months, and I finally got up the nerve to write this letter to her supervisor. I don't know what it was. It was just a terrible feeling. Maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe, I don't know. I was making excuses for this woman, and feeling that I was going to out her to her supervisor, and it seemed so unfair. And so I finally wrote the letter. I just sort of decided to kick myself in the butt and do it. And her supervisor wrote back, who was the dean of the School of Communications, and was very thankful and said, this woman teaches young people, and we recognize that we have a diverse student body, and thank you so much for getting in touch, and we will inform her that that this fits the mission of Metropolitan Community College, the workshop that you're doing, and we support this kind of work. So when I read the book, I had to look at that word white solidarity and think about my own white solidarity in that particular instance, and then it made me think about all the other potential examples of where I have probably done similar things, sort of not outed or not confronted or let things go by that I shouldn't have if I'm going to be an ally, a real ally in anti-racist work. So I know you all are eager to dive into your conversation, so I just want to close. Ajmal has taught me that we have to do readings at the beginning of all of our events, so I'm going to close with a short reading. It's from a book by Debbie Irving. It was written in 2016. She wrote a book called Waking Up White and Finding Myself in the Story of Race. And this is from page 249 of that book. Self-examination and the courage to admit bias and unhelpful inherited behaviors may be our greatest tools for change. Allowing ourselves to be vulnerable enough to expose our ignorance and insecurities takes courage and love. I believe the most loving thing a person or a group of people can do for another is to examine the ways in which their own insecurities and assumptions interfere with others' ability to thrive. Please join me in opening your heart and mind to the possibility that you, yes, even well-intentioned you, have the room to change and grow so that you can work with people of all colors and ethnicities to co-create communities that can unite, strengthen, and prosper. So what we're going to do now is on your tables you have some agendas that have questions on them, and we're going to take about 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, we'll see how it goes, to converse about those questions as you see fit at your tables, and then we're going to meet back to talk about what we can do together and individually to move the needle on race. Have at it. All right. We have to come back It is fun, isn't it? So what we're going to do is pass the mic around from table to table, and what we want to ask you to do is to report back on. I'm going to wait for the last 5 people to start talking. So I'm going to ask you to report back on what was the most interesting thing, or if you have to, 2 things, that you talked about at your table that are going to help us push the needle forward on race.
I was guilted into being the first one, I'm listening. The question was the most. What was the question again?
What was the most interesting thing that you talked about, the most compelling thing that you talked about that will help us move the needle on race?
Okay, so we talked about, I don't know if it's interesting or compelling, but fundamental. We talked about that initial reaction when you are called out on something or that you've done something problematic. That, you know, we talked about things like crying and being defensive, and the defenses that she talks about in the book that help to shut down that conversation rather than have that conversation. And that when that person is calling you out or sharing that with you, they're taking a risk and doing something to make you better, so that there's an appreciation that should be there rather than a, why would you say that about me? You know, you must be calling me a bad person. So that was one of the things we talked about.
So what you're saying is what you should be doing is what?
Being appreciative for that and using it as a learning opportunity for yourself rather than being angry or frustrated that person, or defensive that person called you out.
Okay. That's true. Whoa, how did I know I was going to go there?
I'm the only non-white male. That's how I was going to say it.
You're not even male.
I'm the only not white male.
Oh, so the question is,
So we spent time talking about a lot. Let's see. We talked a little bit about how can white people be allies of people of color, and so we discussed a little bit about how it's been commonplace for many churches, particularly in West Omaha, to just throw money into North Omaha and not want to actually get involved. And so we discussed the importance of truly understanding the needs and being there to help and not just write a check. We also talked about being more aware of when we should speak up, when we're in those uncomfortable situations maybe where Karen used the example I kind of had a conversation with, when we see the black person pulled over or being confronted by a police officer, and is it, you know, do you stop, do you watch, do you wait to see what's going on, or do you drive along your way and just assume everything is okay? And then lastly, just being more aware of, several of us in the room are doing the Black Lives Matter trip this summer, and so really trying to educate ourselves into Black history, as well as knowing where we are supporting. So supporting businesses of North Omaha, subscribing to the Star, looking for business in North Omaha when you need services, instead of just the default West Omaha electrician. You know, is there somebody in North Omaha where you can be supporting a small business to help that area?
good, thank you.
One of the things that we talked about is a current event that recently happened, and I won't go into detail, but it was during the Cohen hearings. There was an incident you know what I'm, okay, it's a very interesting exchange where a black female congresswoman who was called to participate in the hearing and ask questions points out that her being asked to testify is an example of racism because the person who asked her to testify is, it's kind of complicated, but it's a very interesting exchange. But what happens in this hearing is that she puts the guy on the defensive so much that it goes nowhere. It's kind of an unproductive exchange, but an interesting communication example. I used to be a comm teacher, can you tell? So we talked about, I don't know that we came to a good solution on this, but really examining your communication skills so that you can call someone out on their racist acts, but do so in a way that it doesn't shut the communication down and shut the conversation down before it goes anywhere. And we're still figuring out how you do that.
And that takes wit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think wit is a good way to do that. And putting the reflection back of you of if they said something that was racist, acknowledging like that prompted you to think something and you're processing that and so that it comes back on you rather than calling them out on it, so that it can create an exchange rather than shutting down. Because what you see, like in this Cohen example, is that I think that what happens is because being called a racist is such an intractable character flaw. There's no room to be redeemed from that. There's very little conversation that can happen. And I find this, I feel for our black community members that so deserve to just call us out on those acts. But then if it doesn't go anywhere, have we accomplished anything? So how do we evolve our communication skills so we can have those conversations? Two, Eric talked about joining more interracial communities in the neighborhood, in Omaha, finding those and being a part of them, because we talked at our table of how several of us have been part of more colorful communities in the past, but our social circles have gotten wider. And so how can we go back to having more colorful communities in our lives?
Great, thank you. I'm going to use an example that I gave here as well, and that is that I discovered it when I asked students that I taught at Tech High School, which was predominantly black at the time, and I said, "Why did you accept me?" And their answer was, "Because we knew you cared." I made mistakes. I had my white fragility. But because I had demonstrated to them that I cared, they were accepting of that. And so whether I knew it or not, I was accepted in the community. But I've since obviously learned that I have made those mistakes, and now I need to correct them and also become vocal again. I will admit that after teaching for 34 years at Tech and North, I was willing to say I don't have to. I can now do other things. I've worked with the community and I've been involved in the community, but now I realize that I'm never going to leave that community, and so I need to maintain my involvement in that community.
She volunteered. I was not.
Hello. Hello. Hi. How are you guys doing? Good. Pretty great. Thank you. So some of the things that we talked about were like answering her mistakes on how to concentrate or concrete steps or what's that right? Steps or to take now that you have this new lens for analyzing racial relations. I have not read the book, I just had it today. I was curious about the book and just knowing what white fragility was, so that's why I came. But in our group, we talked about some people just inviting other people in the community that may not look like them with like having Tuesday coffee in the morning and stuff like that, educating yourself on race and just different stuff like that, and then going out your community into other communities and just interacting and doing something that's adding diversity and not just secluding people. For some things that I was thinking of, just like knowing your power that you have. So I went to like an inclusivity camp and it talks about different isms, ageism, sexism, racism, and just it also educates students. It's a diversity camp, so it's everyone, but educating them on the power that they have and knowing that sometimes we may not look alike, but a lot of people go through the same things, and knowing that can go far. And then just what you teach your kids at home, like different things that you say, and just watching what you say, because kids pick up a lot, so just what you're educating your kids on and stuff like that, and then just knowing also, I feel like history books, once again, what is taught in history books and what is represented is one big thing. So, thank you.
Okay, we're at this table. Who's the spokesperson here?
Go for it.
Hi. So at our table, we mainly talked about
Concrete steps. We're talking about number 6. What are we going to do?
All right. So we were mainly talking about basically how the, I guess, white fragility as a whole and the discomfort towards talking about race, and how some of the people at the table were saying that
He tried.
Okay, so the discomfort when it comes to discussing race. I did flat out say that I had very little sympathy. We are talking about people's lives versus people's feelings. So I think pushing that conversation forward, because in the end, what's more important? Someone's hurt feelings, or maybe they have to second guess the way they're acting, what they've said, or yet another black kid or black man getting shot. Second, which will go along with this table right over here, is education. Some concrete steps. There's not much we're going to be able to do about textbooks anytime soon. History has been softened and whitewashed for how long? So it does take individual families going to comes home every day. I hear, what do you learn in civics? And then, so we do a quick re-education. He gets the historical context, the cultural context. Black History Month wanted to focus on MLK. He got another quick lesson on Malcolm X.
Good, thank you. And who's here?
The challenge for me is having to be direct about something that's so complicated. I think climate change, Middle East, wellness. To me, part of the solution is having conversations that are more indirect representations of the questions that come out of the arts and humanities. So what I've proposed is not the solution, far from it, but a possibility, is a 5-week session that UNMC and UNO and Connecticut are sharing trying to bring 12 African American people in our community who live north of Cummings Street, east of 72nd Street, and 12 healthcare workers to a creative writing table where they'll be guided by a talented professor who works in creative nonfiction and telling and sharing stories back and forth across the table that have to do with health issues. And I have no idea what those outcomes will be. We're in a recruitment phase for that. I'm promoting my project that I'm sharing with several colleagues, but to me, that's easier than trying to take on something directly because this is so, I'm not saying anything that we don't know, but this is so loaded and complicated and full of ambiguity that I'm a little bit stunned by the conversation. I didn't feel like I articulated my points very effectively, and I don't know if I can.
Anyone else? No drops right here.
Everyone enjoy. I just wanted to make sure it's kind of the last, if you're asking for last comments or another comment, which I'm doing. What about black fragility? How about like black, Hispanic, Oriental, Native fragility, human fragility? Quick question, long, complicated answer. I just thought I'd put it out there. I didn't want to answer the question. I just wanted to kind of put it out there, and I think you know what I mean. You know, all lives matter.
Good. You know, one thing I was going to say at our table that I don't think we articulated as well is giving more people a chance to do these conversations. Reverend Portia made a comment and she said something that resonated with me. She said, when you're the only person of color in the room and someone calls on you and they expect you to answer, sometimes you don't always want to answer because you're the only one. They assume that you got to be that spokesperson directly or indirectly. So that resonated with me because sometimes people put you on the spot. The other thing for me was how few people do this in this community. I mean, I learned something over the years just doing this. How few people of color get a chance to hear authentic white folks talk about their being frail about race issues or even confessing about some of the things they did or did not do. And what I keep running into is that our institutions don't deal with it. And here's my last point. This is on tape. When I go to work every day, I can count less than 5 African Americans or 3 Hispanics I see every day in a building that is government funded. And so every time I walk in a room, and I've said this before, I always count race. That's just how I've been socialized. But can you imagine doing that all your life in Omaha, Nebraska, where we're 33% people of color? So my point is, we have to begin to have more of these conversations so we know how the others feel. But the other point for me is, I know there are very few people of color who have to get the opportunity to hear white folks talk about what they do to deal with race issues. So this becomes more important to take this to other churches and other social institutions. And again, we all believe in diversity, but you would never know that in our apartheid city.
So thank you all for coming. In closing, I just want to say that if you look around the room here, oh yes, and I'm being reminded to advertise our next event. As you look around the room here, this is a majority white room. And so I want to talk primarily to my white friends here today and say that, you know, bumping off of what Ajmal was talking about, it is incumbent upon us not to depend on people of color to stand up for, to be the anti-racists. We need to learn how to be the anti-racists, and it's a challenge that we have to face. We have to overcome our own inertia. We have to overcome our tendency to, you know, be in white solidarity with our the other people who look like us. And so one of the takeaways that I hope all of us white folks will leave with tonight is it's up to us to be allies in the anti-racist movement to the folks in the room and in our communities who are people of color. And that means every day thinking about what we're doing to move the needle on this issue. Did you have something that you wanted to add?
I did. It was just about the earlier statement I said that. Just like I heard a lot of like I don't know, I feel like I have to say something only because I feel like all lives matter is a topic that's always shared a lot, and it wouldn't be a topic if like Black Lives Matter is something that's going to have Police Lives Matter and have all these matters, but they're created for Black Lives Matter wouldn't have been created if All Lives Matter was a thing. Like if All Lives Matter, then we wouldn't have a Black Lives Matter. So understanding the importance of that statement and not saying All Lives Matter, because of course all lives matter. If we know, and we all are here, and we're learning about white fragility and learning about different things that are going on, but just knowing that this is created for a reason and understanding why it's created and going more into depth on why, like how to stop it, like they were saying, like just different things that you can do, and just like I'm a student, I go to North High School, and understanding using a lot of the youth and using a lot of my friends don't know about this, a lot of people don't know about the Native American topic that's going to be discussed, but just knowing, getting that distributed to different communities, getting that put out so people know. And sometimes it's like transportation, you can't stop that. But just so people are aware, because I only found this out from Facebook. I didn't have no one tell me like, hey, you should come. But just getting that publicized through that way, because not everybody's going to see it, especially if they don't have a phone and they can't afford a phone because they have to pay for other things. So it's just a lot of things that you have to learn about. And one thing, I want to add was like cultural competence, knowing that different, hopefully I'm saying it right, different people's situations and not everyone being the same and how they grow up and what they go through. So just being mindful of that, and that's even with teachers and stuff like that.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. We are having our next event here will be on March 12th. Is it going to be here? Yes, and it's on Native Americans, what is justice? You've got flyers on your table. Again, a conversation at the intersection of race. Thank you all for coming, and have a great evening. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Also, please fill out the evaluations that are on your table.
The taping of this, where's it going to be available at?
The next.
So I've been filming Christian Adventist church events as part of an ongoing documentary about race discussion, race relations in Omaha for the last 3 years. So this is a collection of several dozen events that I've been capturing around the city. So that'll be a project that'll come out. Nothing's published yet, but the completed project will be done sometime later this year or early next year.
And Elijah, will your tape be on your website?
Yeah, can I say something?
Yes.
My name is Elijah Ali. My background is in communication. I've been in communications in this area for over 40 years in Omaha. I would like for this group to really, because you're going to see this tape, and you may see it we don't ever edit. There's always a full copy, and Nigel will always have that copy to provide. But we pull sound bites, because most of our information goes across Facebook, and you can't get their attention with this long. You have to get their attention real quick. So you have to bring in things that are really strategic. This is the first group that I have ever attended that was real. And that has a very strong circumference to it. What I'm saying now, I'm not saying this to be funny or aggressive. I really want you to understand what I'm saying. I'm saying this from my inside. Doing this tape, a large portion of you, even though this is the smallest portion of you that we have ever taped under this particular circumstances, you being here says something. The second thing is you not being able to say anything on this issue saying something. Because, in all honesty, the issue is very difficult for non-blacks to associate to, because the structure itself is predicated on you not doing that with intimidation. For you to do it, you'll be intimidated, because your structure is predicated on a capitalistic system, which means there has to be a have in order, it has to be a have not in order for there to be a have. And so your issue, I'm 74 years old, and whenever a group like this comes together and some of their issues comes out to be cultural competency, and people in the room are in their 50s and 60s and 70s, I catch that with all, because there's only so much about us that you need to learn, because our existence affects you on a day-to-day basis. Am I making myself clear? This group has really dealt with a very serious situation, very honestly, from all facets. And I congratulate you on that.